to the Japanese Grand Prix. Here we go. I can see some messages coming through. Ryan the Lego, how are you doing? YS Magique. I'm going to go for Josh Swain. Hello, mate. How are you? Welcome back. Welcome back from yesterday. Goodness gracious me. Brody, how are we doing? Oh, it's a little bit chilly, actually. I'm a little bit cold, but we'll get warmed up momentarily. Apologies if this is a little bit echoey. This room is now very empty, apart from the things that you can see behind me. We'll give it a go. Hello. Almost 1 a.m. on the East Coast of the USA. That is hardcore. That is hard. Although, that's the kind of time that you can sort of stay up until. The problem I have is like these early races, or the races in the UK that are like 4 a.m. You're like, well, you can't really stay up for that, but also I don't want to get up at that time. It's just going to mess with my head either way round. Yuki is my spirit animal. I mean, as a Yuki fan 2022 official, the official Yuki fan. That does make sense. About 30 degrees in New Mexico. Well, I mean, it is a desert, so that does make sense to one way or another. Shall we get into it then? Shall we start discussing the Japanese Grand Prix? First and foremost, before we get onto the grid, it's important to remind you guys of the predictions. We've started doing some predictions videos this year. We've done 2 so far for China and Japan, where we go through your predictions. If you want to get involved in the predictions, obviously you can get them in the chat right now. But if you want to get involved in the official predictions video, the predictions is released onto the posts tab on the Monday of the race week, so tomorrow for Bahrain, and you can get your votes in for who you think will win, what you think the podium will be, your positive surprise, or your good surprise, the best team of the weekend, the driver who you think will struggle the most, and the flop team of the weekend. And then I go through it as soon as I possibly can. I'm actually going to an event on Tuesday, so that video might come out on Wednesday instead. But overall, you can get involved there. You guys voted for... I mean, you've done pretty well. You've done not too badly here. Wait, that is not the correct one for this weekend. That is not the correct one for this weekend. That's your predictions for China. Let's go back. Let's find your predictions for Japan. Bang. These are your predictions for Japan. So, you've not done too badly. Not done too badly at all. I mean, you divided opinion. Let's say that. But looking forward to the Grand Prix. I very much am. And thank you to the good guy for subscribing there. Appreciate that. On the way to 120,000 subscribers. But these were your predictions. We went through them in that video. But just to remind you, it's been a couple of days since that came out. You went for Lando Norris winning. Starting second on the grid, not a bad shout at all. Nobody had... Oh, well, Max Verstappen came 4th in the poll in terms of drivers who you thought might come or win the Grand Prix and through the podium places. Max Verstappen was 4th on that list. Again, not too bad, but starting from pole position, looking very likely indeed, unless that Red Bull's pace during the race is very, very tricky. You had Oscar Piastri and George Russell on the podium in that order. Piastri 2nd, Russell 3rd. Russell has been on the podium twice so far this season from 2 Grand Prix. So, makes sense. Well, how do you vote? You get involved on the posts tab. So, I put a post out on a Monday, and you can get your predictions in, your official predictions. And of course, you can predict now in the comments as well. You don't have to get involved in the full predictions, but we had about 300-400 people vote on who they thought would win, who would be the podium positions, and so on. And then comes the obvious talking point for the Japanese Grand Prix weekend, Yuki Tsunoda. Half of you thought it was going to be the best driver or the good surprise. half of you thought he was going to really struggle over the course of the Japanese Grand Prix weekend. Really did divide opinion, the Yuki Tsunoda swap. And therefore, he kind of sits in both categories. Don't know how you'd work that out, whether you've had a good weekend or a bad weekend, depending on if Yuki does really well or really bad. So far, it hasn't started perfectly. It just goes to show, and I think, again, this gives a little bit more respect to Liam, to be honest with you. Just goes to show how tricky that Red Bull car is to drive, and how actually the tiniest of mistakes can be the real difference to your weekend. Because if we do kind of take a little wander down to the qualifying board and the grid that is set for this morning's race, Yuki Tsunoda down in 14th place after Carlos Sainz had that 3-place penalty, dropping him behind. But it was only one tiny little error. And we saw actually in Q1, Yuki had the pace to be there with Max. Yuki was doing pretty well in the first qualifying session. Was, within a tenth? Within 300s, I think it was, off the top of my head, to Max Verstappen in that first qualifying session, and looked fairly okay. Then comes the second qualifying session and just makes the tiniest little mistake down in turn 2. You know, it wasn't dramatic or anything, did spin the car around, but just loses the rear end down in turn 2. A little bit like what George Russell did on the final lap that he did in qualifying as well. It was the tiniest little mistake, and that can be the difference, to be honest with you. One tiny error loses you 5, 6, 7 places on the grid. Like, Yuki wasn't too far off. It's a couple of tenths maybe of making it through into Q3, and that was all lost in that one corner. You did 18 corners, you mess up one of them, and then you're down in 14th place. Like, that is how tight the grid was yesterday, and that's how difficult and how competitive Formula One is right now. And we saw at the end of 2024 that it was going to ramp up and it was going to be closer and closer than ever. Everyone expecting the McLarens to run away with it. I don't think they will. I think, you're seeing Verstappen there, Leclerc there, Russell's been on the podium places too. I think it's going to be a really tight season. And even if the McLarens are the two fighting for the title, the Red Bulls, the Ferraris, the Mercedes are going to be in and amongst it and making it difficult for them. And, nabbing points here and there from various sides of that title fight. Max Verstappen not out of the title fight by any means, though. By any means at all. He's right in there, starting from pole position as well. Lando Norris just behind him. Those are the top two in the Drivers' Championship right now. George Russell only starting 5th. It's not impossible that George Russell wins this race and suddenly becomes leading the Drivers' Championship. We're still very early on in the season, and it's playing out in that way. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda can feel actually a little bit hard done by. So I've seen some people saying, well, this is already a struggle weekend for Yuki, and this prediction's kind of locked in. I don't know. I think in the race it could go the other way, depending on how it goes. I can't get home in time. You can, Seto Kaiba. Just take one of your various Blue Eyes White Dragon style jets. Why is Hamilton on 8th? That's where he qualified. The only thing they're fighting is for P10. No. Goodness gracious. Oh. George Russell. Little bit damp, but a dry race. Oh yeah, we should talk about that. And I think somebody literally just asked, is it going to rain? No. So it was predicted to rain when we came into this weekend. You might remember, if you did watch the predictions video, it was expected to rain. It had like a 70% chance of raining earlier on in the week, and that only actually got sort of closer and closer to that 70% mark. But it actually rained just before the race. So it shouldn't rain during, and it should be fairly dry by the time that we actually get underway. But yeah, it did rain earlier on in the morning, as it were, for the Japanese Grand Prix and where the Japanese time is. So it rained in the morning, but has dried up since. So George Russell, they're just confirming it's still a little bit damp. Not anything, drastic. There's no standing water or anything like that on the track. Just a tiny little bit damp to the touch. And therefore, maybe a little bit slippery on the first couple of laps or so. Although I wouldn't expect it to be. Like, looking at the track surface, there's nothing too dramatic about it. But that rain has kind of come and gone, and therefore should not rain during the Grand Prix itself. Which I think is actually a good thing. I know that we love a wet race here and there. It does spice up the grid. It mixes up the order. Definitely allows those teams towards the back end of the pack. If you're a Hadjar or an Albon or a Behrman, you're probably open for a little bit of rain, in that you might have a shot at a podium just because of the madness of it. But actually, I'd quite like to see a full race weekend without any sort of weirdness to it. We've seen so far, we've had the Australian Grand Prix where it's been wet. So we didn't really get to look at the pace of the cars in Australia. We only had qualifying to go off of. And then it was a sprint weekend in China. And also, the Chinese Grand Prix is a bit of a weird one because it's a track that not a lot of the drivers had driven before. It's not really part of any of the feeder series. So a lot of the drivers literally have never been there. Obviously, they'll have driven it on the simulator however many times, but they've never actually physically been to the track. And it's slightly different, doing it on a simulator and doing it in real life. So we didn't really get to see that play out either, because we had the issue of it being a sprint weekend and only one free practice session. Although you could argue that the free practice sessions here have been fairly sporadic, haven't they, with the crashes. Free practice 1 was okay. Free practice 2, Jack Doohan crashed. Fernando Alonso crashed. Then free practice 3, there was so many fires that caused red flags. Caused a red flag yesterday for a fire on the track as well. They have been trying to sort out that problem because if there is a red flag because of the grass fires, I'm going to be quite annoyed. Like, it will effectively ruin the race. Okay, I know it will add a bit of drama. It'll add in the fact that, we're going to see some drivers shuffle around in terms of their positions. But especially if it comes fairly sort of middle-ish of the race, it just means that everybody will pit, but they have to because it's a red flag. They'll change their tires then, and we won't see any kind of pit strategy. We won't see any kind of overtaking because of tire degradation or anything like that, because everyone's just going to be on the exact same strategy because they're going to have however many laps done on the set of tires that they're all going to choose. It'd be a bit rubbish, honestly, if there is a red flag because of the grass fires. So hopefully there won't be. It was raining. As I said, it rained earlier on in the morning in Japan. So hopefully that won't be a problem. And they have been trying to address that issue between yesterday and today, because there was just a ridiculous amount of red flags over the course of the weekend so far because of that one issue. Do I watch NASCAR? No, unfortunately not. I would like to get into other forms of motorsport, but just don't have the time, Where do people find the time to do these things? Got a whole job I got to do. Hadjar P7, Liam Lawson P16. Where are you getting that from? Liam Lawson is P13. But it is his first race back in that RB. It is a slightly different car, whereas Hadjar has been absolutely flying so far this season when it's come to qualifying. Had that little mistake in Australia, of course, that didn't help out his career. But everyone has little spins here and there. Do I watch MotoGP? No, I do watch a lot of bike racing. So my dad actually races motorbikes, which is how I kind of got into motorsport. But, it was like that whole, well, I'm not going to be into the same thing that my dad's into. My dad's into motorbikes. I'll choose cars. And then I was like, that's how I kind of got into Formula One. So I do have racing heritage, if you could say that. Not to any kind of professional level or anything like that. But my dad has a lot of racing bikes. Hence the helmet behind me. is one of his old racing helmets. So MotoGP, I should really be into MotoGP, but I'm not. I could get into it quite easily. I've seen a lot of motorbike racing in my time. Is MotoGP? Yeah, it's really good. MotoGP, like a lot of people I know are very into it, obviously. And that my dad knows a lot of people who own sports bikes. So is there. Anyway, we're about 5 minutes out. Let's quickly run down the order just for the people that are joining us as we get closer to the start of the race itself. Max Verstappen starting on pole position, an absolutely phenomenal lap. Like, just ridiculous from Max Verstappen. Even GP said that it was insane. And Max Verstappen kind of out of nowhere. This is the quality of Max Verstappen, isn't it? You can never count him out. It feels like he, ever since winning that first World Championship, has just made sure that he is always in the mix. Absolutely dominated 2022 and 2023. 2024... just made sure he got it over the line. Like, he is so imperious, is Max Verstappen, and starts on pole position. I think that's going to be really tough for the McLarens because the Red Bull starts well. So the McLaren starting behind him, Lando Norris beside him, P2, Oscar Piastri, P3. Going down towards turn 1, it could get a little bit messy. The Red Bull, I'm expecting to start better and get away at the start of the race. Then whether or not the McLarens can kind of reel him back in, we'll have to wait and see. Charles Leclerc starts in 4th place for Ferrari, maybe a little bit ahead of where he was expecting. The Mercedes cars did look to have the better pace initially, and then Ferrari's kind of turned it on just at the end. We know Charles Leclerc can qualify very well wherever you put him. Just over one lap does seem to be able to make it click. George Russell starts beside Kimi Antonelli on the 3rd row of the grid, the two Mercedes cars 5th and 6th. Antonelli side by side with his teammate for the first time this season. That will be interesting to see how those two kind of differ as the race goes on. Can Antonelli keep pace with his teammate, or will he slowly drift away? Then we've got Isaac Hadjar in 7th place. Best of the rest so far, and the second highest RB driver. Goodness me. Like, does he get the second Red Bull seat now? Is that how it works? We'll have to wait and see. Lewis Hamilton starts in 8th place just beside him. That's also a dream come true for Isaac Hadjar. Amazing to see, you know, him side by side with his hero. But then your hero becomes your competitor. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out down towards turn 1 as well. Will Hadjar give Hamilton too much space, too much adulation? And then 9th place, Alex Albon. 10th place, Ollie Behrman on the 5th row of the grid, rounding out the point scoring places. Albon on for a 3rd point scoring performance in 3 Grand Prix weekends, which would be a sublime start to the Williams season for Alex Albon. You know, people were putting him under pressure, saying Carlos Sainz is going to be the real test for Alex Albon. He has come out swinging this season. And Ollie Behrman on for another point scoring position after inheriting some point scoring places last time out as well. Pierre Gasly and Fernando Alonso starting just outside of that, the two drivers to drop out in Q2. And then Carlos Sainz was there in 12th place. He got a 3-place penalty for impeding Lewis Hamilton. So Fernando Alonso inherits 12th place. We then have 2 Red Bull powered cars side by side in 13th and 14th. It is Liam Lawson just ahead of Yuki Tsunoda after that swap last week. Oh my goodness me. It's going to be tasty down towards turn 1 between the two of them, isn't it? Yuki Tsunoda is going to be all eyes on Liam Lawson. And Tsunoda's going to have his eyes on some points, isn't he, this weekend? Liam Lawson's going to be doing his best to stop him from doing that. We've got then Carlos Sainz starting 15th, as I say, after that 3-place penalty. And then the 5 drivers that dropped out in Q1. Nico Hülkenberg and Gabriel Bortoleto 16th and 17th place for the Stake Sauer team. Interesting that Gabriel Bortoleto starting on the hard compound tyre at the back. Esteban Ocon starts in 18th, also on a slightly scrubbed set of hard compound tyres. And the 2 drivers right at the back of the grid, Jack Doohan after his sort of very heavy crash in free practice 2. Couldn't quite get together the lap that he wanted to. Dropped out in 19th place. And Lance Stroll made a mistake over the grass through the S's and out in 20th place. That is our grid for the Japanese Grand Prix. We're about a minute away from the start of our 53 laps. Of course, the formation lap to come, as well as the drivers are just being placed down on the tarmac. Let's head over to the race board as we can see the drivers pull away from the grid. And hello, everybody who is joining us for the start of the Grand Prix. If I could be as nice just to ask you to hit that like button. We've got 250 people in the chat. If we could get up to 200 likes on the stream, that'd be absolutely incredible. And maybe also hit that subscribe button if you are new. We are live every single weekend. Am I streaming on Twitch? Unfortunately not. I would have been, but I was supposed to be moving house and then I had to get temporary internet. So the internet is not quite strong enough for me to be able to stream on YouTube and Twitch, but the Twitch streams are coming. Don't you worry. They will be coming back very, very soon. We sort of started the season with it. Then I was hoping the move was going to be done. Been a few delays in the move. Not going to lie, not something that you really want to hear about during the formation lap of the Japanese Grand Prix. But this is the real world that we live in. Yeah, so the move will happen soon. Once the move is done, internet will be back to full strength. And we will be able to actually live stream everywhere. Here we are then. Max Verstappen ahead of Lando Norris. Seeing Ocon just moving away at the back of the grid there. Stroll and Doohan just behind him. So we do finally have all the drivers moving in this first formation lap in Japan. 53 laps to come after this. All eyes will be though at the front of the grid. Max Verstappen versus Lando Norris. It's the first time they've been side by side this season. Let's see what they can do at the front of the pack. Of course, they had their comings together last year, didn't they, those two? But under very different circumstances, where Max Verstappen was leading the championship. Lando Norris has that lead of the championship. But Max Verstappen will be doing everything that he can to make sure that that doesn't last as long. Of course, Max Verstappen was leading the championship for over 1,000 days before Lando Norris took victory in Australia. Max Verstappen just coming down towards the chicane. The other place where all of the eyes will be, of course, the Japanese driver in his home Grand Prix, Yuki Tsunoda, starting from 14th place, but vitally side by side with the man that he has replaced at Red Bull, Liam Lawson, just ahead of him in 13th place. I'm sure there will be some fireworks down in that midfield pack as they battle their way through towards the top 10 positions, and Yuki Tsunoda trying to prove that he can score points where Liam Lawson couldn't in the first 2 races of the season. Max Verstappen, though, takes his spot on the grid. Ferrari of Charles Leclerc just coming to a stop as well. Of course, all 20 cars have to be stationary before we can get underway. Stroll and Doohan, the final pair, just coming up towards that chicane at the end of the lap, turn 16 and 17. No rain expected during the Grand Prix, which slight change compared to what we were told earlier on in the week. Max Verstappen is pointing to the left. He knows he's going to have to cover off Lando Norris. Lando Norris, though, aggressively points his McLaren car as well. And here we are then. Lance Stroll does come to a stop at the back of the grid. Waiting for that green flag to be waved, which it is. And 5 red lights between us and the start of this Japanese Grand Prix. Here we go then. Max Verstappen gets away well. comes straight across to cover Lando Norris. Lando Norris tucks in behind the Red Bull, then tries to move to the outside. Oscar Piastri's got some defending to do from the Ferrari of Charles Leclerc, but manages to do so. The two McLarens also getting away very well. Isaac Hadjar then putting Antonelli under pressure, but can't get around this time. Hamilton, Albon, and Behrman, the top 10 come through as they were. Albon just keeping himself ahead. Alonso has managed to jump in front of Pierre Gasly. And we've also got Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda battling away. Nico Hülkenberg has been able to get in front of Carlos Sainz for now. But Max Verstappen leads. Lando Norris slots in just behind. Keeping an eye on Liam Lawson and Yuki Tsunoda, but they managed to get through the first couple of corners without any chaos between them. Ollie Behrman now under pressure from Fernando Alonso. Goes a little bit wide, does Ollie Behrman, but keeps it okay and keeps his 10th place position for now. It's a decent little exit. And Gasly's trying to go around the outside of Fernando Alonso. Fernando Alonso's going to have to leave some space there. They're side by side. Alonso and Gasly going for it. Gasly trying to use the Alpine that, of course, Fernando Alonso left to go to Aston Martin. It doesn't manage to do it this time around. Alonso keeps the position. Gasly, though, trying again. But Alonso doing enough. Tsunoda trying to move up in front of Liam Lawson and does get that position, does Yuki Tsunoda. So Tsunoda is up into 13th place and dispatches Liam Lawson. There's a little wet patch just going down towards turn 1, where we had some rain before the Grand Prix, but it doesn't seem to be affecting anybody too much. Verstappen now disappearing away from Lando Norris. Norris trying to keep within that DRS range if he can. Piastri behind in 3rd place as well. Everybody's settling into their positions now, it feels. The top 10, as it was when we started. Alonso has moved up a place. Tsunoda has moved up a place. Hülkenberg has moved up a place. But everybody else has just settled in. Gabriel Bortoleto has had the worst start. He has moved down to 20th place in that Stake Sauber car. But here we are then. Verstappen still leads. Nico Hülkenberg under pressure from Carlos Sainz. Carlos Sainz trying to get back ahead of Nico Hülkenberg as he was at the start. And I think Hülkenberg is going to have to give him that place. He is. Carlos Sainz up into 15th place. And Kimi Antonelli, yeah, of course, could become the youngest Grand Prix winner in Formula One. But that will only be the case if he can do it today. Oh, and somebody's gone a little bit wide. There was someone going through the runoff area there. And for some reason, the trackboard is a little bit behind. So I might do a reset of that in a second. Lot of DRS. Okay, I'm going to quickly reset the lap. Oh, and it was Antonelli. I thought someone had gone wide. It was Kimi Antonelli. Managed to keep it in front of Isaac Hadjar anyway. Kimi Antonelli gone very deep and gone through the runoff area. Max Verstappen has escaped away from Lando Norris, though. That second gap now broken. Oh. And Max Verstappen struggling with the upshifts in that Red Bull car. Possibly a little bit of lag. I think that's the most annoying thing. Yuki Tsunoda in 13th place, just keeping an eye on his pace behind his old teammate Pierre Gasly. Of course, Gasly got that call up to the Red Bull team in a very similar way to Liam Lawson. Didn't get very long. I mean, Liam Lawson got incredibly not too long, but Matt Gasly didn't get too long in that Red Bull either. It's Yuki Tsunoda's turn 5 years down the line. Max Verstappen. Worse in the first sector, he says, about those upshifts. So, struggling at the moment. Charles Leclerc under pressure from George Russell. Russell, the closest competitor inside of the top 10. Everybody else sitting in either DRS trains or without DRS at this point. Norris actually got the slightly better start, which I was not expecting, down towards turn 1. But Max Verstappen knew what he needed to do. And this is shuffling across, making sure that Max Verstappen kept that lead, knew what he needed to do to get in front of Lando Norris and just shut off going down towards turn 1. Oh, thank you, Doggy Boo, for the super chat. Where do I think Yuki Tsunoda will finish in this race? I think he'd be doing really well to get into the points. I think that's got to be the goal, isn't it, for Yuki Tsunoda? It's got to be a point scoring finish. Otherwise, what was the point in all of the changes around? If he doesn't get points on the board, he isn't doing what the Red Bull team require of their second driver, is he? Sergio Perez was getting told off for not getting enough points. At least Sergio Perez was usually finishing, 7th, 8th, 9th, and at least getting a couple of points on the board. Yuki Tsunoda and Liam Lawson, if they can't do that, then they aren't really doing it. Yeah, I don't know why seems like Oscar Piastri is closing into Lando Norris, though. Piastri now within DRS range of his teammate. Are we going to see the two McLarens have a little battle? Max Verstappen will be rubbing his hands together, because if those two McLarens are going to be fighting behind, it's just going to allow him a little bit of time to get away at the front of the pack. Max Verstappen looking at his first win of the 2025 season. It's been a long time since he hasn't won the first couple of races of the season, isn't it? Max Verstappen. Shift should improve over the next 2 or 3 laps, says GP on the radio to Max. So Max Verstappen struggles. I mean, he's done very well so far if he is struggling with those upshifts. Isaac Hadjar then just following him and looking at the back of that RB from the perspective of Lewis Hamilton, who is now within 0.4 of a second of Isaac Hadjar. Through the final chicane they go. Can Lewis Hamilton have a little look at the back of the RB down towards turn 1? Closing in, DRS wide open. Pulls over to the right-hand side as Lewis Hamilton, and Hamilton is going to get past Isaac Hadjar. Hamilton up into 7th place he goes then. And Isaac Hadjar, who, of course, was talking so glowingly about Lewis Hamilton at the beginning of the season, has now had to watch the Ferrari move past him and disappear into the distance. The sort of top 7, as you would expect, really. Isaac Hadjar, best of the rest in terms of those midfield drivers. And still there now. Alex Albon, though, is within a second of Hadjar. So we're going to start to see the battle for best of the rest from 8th through to 10th. Hadjar, Albon, Behrman, all within DRS range of one another. Fernando Alonso has fallen slightly aback from that. 2 seconds adrift of Ollie Behrman as it stands. We are, of course, missing one driver from the top 4 teams in the top 10. That's Yuki Tsunoda down in 13th place. What can he do? He's unfortunately in a bit of a DRS train at this moment in time because Gasly has DRS to Alonso. So Tsunoda's DRS to Gasly isn't helping him out too much. He has at least been able to get past Liam Lawson, and Lawson now 2.5 seconds adrift of Yuki Tsunoda behind him. Yuki Tsunoda, yeah, he's closing in on Gasly, but the problem is Gasly then has the DRS for Alonso, and therefore Gasly can just use that also. So Gasly's advantage is there. Yuki still trying though. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. Massively appreciate that. A few subscriptions coming in. If you are new, hit that subscribe button. Road to 120,000, which would be ridiculous if we can do it during this triple header. I think we're about 1,000 away. Maybe we get 1,000 over the next couple of weeks. It's certainly doable. We'll have to wait and see. Max Verstappen then 2 seconds ahead of Lando Norris and seemingly disappearing into the distance. And Verstappen's shifts are now getting better. I mean, he's led throughout. 7 laps into the race. Seems fairly comfortable, does Max Verstappen at this point. Fastest lap of the race, also with Max Verstappen. And just moving away from Lando Norris in this one. Piastri then behind. Within DRS range of his teammate still, but not able to get that move done at the moment. We'll be just waiting for an opportunity to strike. The tiniest error from Lando Norris would open that door to Oscar Piastri. Charles Leclerc, George Russell just behind. Russell still within DRS range of Leclerc, was right under the rear wing of that Ferrari and has just fallen back a touch. But now Russell just trundling along. Kimi Antonelli doing pretty well, 1.5 seconds behind his teammate. I want to keep an eye on that Antonelli race pace. Of course, did make a mistake, which cost him a few tenths, but if he can keep up with George Russell in terms of race pace over the distance, I think that'll be very impressive return from Kimi Antonelli, who's had a couple of very good weekends, you have to say. Isaac Hadjar still best of the rest in 8th place. Alex Albon has now dropped outside of DRS range, and that DRS train has broken up. It's only Yuki Tsunoda, actually, who still has that DRS advantage. So this is now Yuki Tsunoda's opportunity to pounce if he can get that Red Bull car working underneath him, because he's now got that chance to go for it where Gasly does not have DRS. So let's see what he can do. Isaac Hadjar getting a little bit of a go in the chat. Love to see it. Does make you wonder if they're sort of waiting for something in the pit stops. Expecting to be a kind of 2-stop race, depending on how the hards hold up. We said that the Chinese Grand Prix was likely to be a 2-stopper, and then everybody did a 1-stop. So we'll have to wait and see, but expected to be a 2-stop. Japan is pretty heavy on the tyres just because of the high-speed nature of the corners, especially these S's that we're just watching Hadjar and Albon come through together. Hadjar and Albon, of course, battling for that best of the rest position behind the top 7. Lando Norris on the radio. Lando Norris being told on the radio, possible rain on lap 20. But it would only be a sprinkle and fairly light rain. So it wouldn't actually end up changing too much. Doggy View again with the super chat. Thank you so much. Subscribe to your channel. Journey to 120k lives on. I hope so. Yeah, the journey to 100 took a long time, actually. It was a very long time. Then last year, just absolute spike. The goal at the end of last year was 50,000. We got to like 110. So the goal for this year, Bob's your uncle. I don't know. Have to wait and see. Setting 120 as the first target. We'll see what we can do from there. Kimi Antonelli on board with him. Just still 1.5 seconds or so behind his teammate. But George Russell is the man in the top 5 making moves at this point. Oscar Piastri has dropped outside of DRS range. So George Russell are our hope for some battling in the top 5. But just looks like everybody is settled in. And here comes Lance Stroll into the pits for a very early stop. Of course, he did start the race on the soft compound tyre, so was hoping to make up some positions in the early stages of the race. And now comes in to change onto those hards. We've also got Lewis Hamilton on the hard compound tire, and his pace is pretty decent on the hard. So we'll sort of see when those start to go off for Lewis Hamilton, and that'll tell us whether or not people will be thinking about a one-stop or a two-stop. As I say, majority of drivers should be on a two-stop strategy here. It's the expected strategy, but you never know. You never really know. Does sometimes play out slightly differently. Alex Albon on the radio. And Albon not very happy on the radio at all. Having a similar issue to Max Verstappen, maybe, in his gear shifts are not working in the way that he was hoping they would be. And Albon really struggling inside of that Williams car to get himself into the right gear. It's not really something you want, is it? Through the S's comes Charles Leclerc. Still under pressure from George Russell, and Russell deciding that now is the opportunity to go for it. Yeah, Hamilton's pace on the hard is pretty interesting. Hamilton sort of matching the rest of the field for now. What happened to Stroll? Stroll just pitted. That's why he's adrift. I mean, he started at the back of the pack anyway, but he decided to go very, very early on the pit stop and maybe go very long on this stint of hard tyres. Maybe hoping for some kind of safety car or red flag wouldn't help him. Some kind of safety car. Max Verstappen still leads then as he comes around the final corner. Lap 12 of the Grand Prix. And starting to see George Russell again just closing onto the rear wing of the Ferrari, but the Ferrari escapes away just enough through the DRS zone. The Mercedes crew watching on as George Russell half a second behind Leclerc still. Max Verstappen still leads by a couple of seconds. Lando Norris does make you wonder whether or not Lando Norris has kind of drifted a couple of seconds back intentionally because he was falling away pretty substantially towards the beginning of the race, but now is 2 seconds back and has stayed 2 seconds back for a substantial period of time. Maybe just waiting for the pit stops, going for that undercut, which seems to be the way forward here. Would have to close that gap a little bit, you would imagine. Even with the undercut, it'd be impressive to get a 2-second gap on Verstappen. Unless the Red Bull pit stop is slightly slower. Piastri then has also drifted away from his teammate. Just set the fastest lap of the race as Oscar Piastri, but is 1.5 seconds adrift of his teammate. And another fast lap again from Piastri. The McLaren's just starting to turn it up a little bit to keep themselves within that 2-second range of Max Verstappen, 3.5-second range of Max Verstappen. Maybe start to disappear from Leclerc, who's a couple of seconds behind, battling with George Russell. Kimi Antonelli has fallen another second or so away from Russell, is now 2.6 seconds adrift. Lewis Hamilton a second again behind Antonelli. And it is cold. The tyres are cold, according to Lando Norris on the radio. And that maybe means getting a little bit slippery, not getting the temperature into the tyres that they were hoping for. But at the moment, McLaren just holding back a little bit. Isaac Hadjar still best of the rest. Alex Albon was closing into the back of the RB, but seemingly having a problem with shifting. And Ollie Behrman down into 10th place. So the only swap inside of the top 10 so far this race is Lewis Hamilton moving up ahead of Isaac Hadjar. Apart from that, we have not seen any movement inside of the top 10. And even Yuki Tsunoda, who we were kind of expecting to maybe close in on Pierre Gasly at this point in the race because he has the DRS where Gasly doesn't, is still stuck behind the rear wing of the Alpine. So Tsunoda also just having to wait and judge this. So that and Yuki Tsunoda running around. Let's see what he can do behind Pierre Gasly. We're just watching the rear wing of Pierre Gasly's Alpine. Tsunoda still within a second. Had that DRS down towards turn one. Actually lost a couple of tenths to Pierre Gasly in that. And just trying to keep hold of it. Charles Leclerc has broken George's DRS. Yeah, he has indeed. Finally, Charles Leclerc gets away from him. George was sort of ever so slightly tempting Charles Leclerc to move in a defensive way, but Charles Leclerc just held his line and made sure that he got the job done. Didn't subside to any of the pressure that George Russell was putting him under, and now has been able to wait until George Russell's tyres have maybe just started to fall away, and therefore he's just wanting a little bit more room to get those tyres back into the working window that they need to be. Lap 15 of this race. Verstappen, Norris, Piastri. Still our front three. Leclerc, Russell, Antonelli. Still our three behind that. Lewis Hamilton has moved up into 7th place. Isaac Hadjar dropping one position to 8th. Albon and Behrman where they started. Alonso's moved up a position to 11th. Gasly now down in 12th. Tsunoda's up one place to 13th. Liam Lawson into 14th. Then Carlos Sainz still 15th in the Williams car. Hülkenberg 16th. Ocon 17th. Doohan 18th. Gabriel Bortoleto down in 19th place. And Lance Stroll, the only driver to have stopped so far for some hard compound tyres, is also catching up to the back of the pack. And Lance Stroll trying his best on those hard tyres. In fact, he's not catching up to the back of the pack at all. I thought that said 13, but it says 23. So Lance Stroll still a pit stop behind Gabriel Bortoleto, and his pace, not really anything to write home about, is Lance Stroll, even though he has pitted early and gone onto those hard compound tyres. Maybe just a strategic manoeuvre, though, from Lance Stroll, holding on to those hard compound tyres for the long haul. Yeah, Verstappen faster in those final couple of sectors, indeed. Just, it does make you wonder, though, because Norris has just sat 2 seconds behind. Has now ticked over that 2 seconds again, now 2.1 seconds. Piastri does seem to have the ability to find that little bit more pace when needed, I would say right now. Piastri just a second and a half behind his teammate, has set the fastest lap once more as Piastri. And Yuki Tsunoda closing into Gasly once again. The closest that we've seen Yuki Tsunoda in the last few laps, actually, has come into within half a second. And Jack Doohan decides to duck into the pits at the back as well. So Jack Doohan for a change of tyres. Started on the softs, of course, Jack Doohan. Now onto a set of hard compound tyres down at Alpine. Is he going to be able to get out ahead of Lance Stroll? Should be able to. The gap was 23 seconds when the Alpine car came in. Here comes Lance Stroll down the pit straight, but Doohan is going to have more than enough room to get through turn 1 and turn 2 without being really put under too much pressure by the Aston Martin of Lance Stroll. So Stroll and Doohan, the two drivers that started on the softs, are the two drivers that have come in the earliest, as you would expect, as we are 16 laps into this race. And yeah, it does feel like this is gonna ramp up only when we get to the pit stops this one. Everyone's kind of settled in to where they want to be. And I think everyone's just gone, you know what? I think it's better that we hold on to these tyres for now and try and be the driver that sort of blinks first when it comes to the pit stops and the strategy decisions. Everybody playing it fairly safe. Carlos Sainz has gone really deep into turn 16. Went through, sort of cut the curb, didn't decide to do turn 17. And Pierre Gasly then under pressure from Tsunoda once more. I think Yuki Tsunoda is the only driver out on track within DRS range of the next driver in front of them. I know Carlos Sainz is within a second of Liam Lawson just. But that probably is because he cut the corner at turn 16 as opposed to anything else. Yuki Tsunoda just hasn't been able to get underneath the rear wing of the Alpine. Was very close last lap. I think Pierre Gasly must have made a little mistake somewhere. But then Tsunoda has just drifted again back to that kind of 8 tenths, 7, 8 tenths behind Gasly and not being able to get any closer than that for now. Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda, as I say, the only drivers within DRS range of one another. Although Carlos Sainz actually closing in on the back of Liam Lawson. Verstappen, though, still leads by 1.9 seconds, as it has been for the majority of this race. Piastri then another couple of seconds adrift. Piastri has fallen away a touch, actually. Was sort of sitting in that 1.3, 1.4 second range to Norris. Now up to 1.9. Maybe Norris deciding to step on the gas a little bit. Was 3/10 quicker than his teammate last time around. Charles Leclerc has drifted away in 4th place. Russell is now 2 seconds adrift as well. Lando Norris being told on the radio that the time lost to Verstappen is in the hairpin, which is just where they're coming up to now. But Max Verstappen is pretty good through there. And actually, Piastri is following a very similar line to Lando Norris, which they've also been told on the radio. So maybe just the way that the McLaren is set up can't get through that. Oh, box to overtake Verstappen. You can see just comes through on the radio messages there. Lando Norris box to overtake Verstappen. There's no activity, though, in the McLaren garage. Not seeing the mechanics moving yet, but Norris has stepped on the gas. And I think maybe Lando Norris is going to go for 1 or 2 more laps. And Lando Norris is told to stay out. A little bit of a dummy call, maybe. But Lando Norris, maybe this is the lap then. Lando Norris goes for it, really does close in that gap as much as possible and see if they can get the undercut. Lap 20 of the Grand Prix could be the lap that they go for. Here we go. Still Pierre Gasly ahead of Yuki Tsunoda. Watching that on board. Watching Lando Norris, though. He's closing the gap to Max Verstappen fairly substantially. And Lando Norris deciding maybe this is the time. The problem is Lando Norris will come out in a little bit of traffic. Likely to come out in and around where sort of Albon, Behrman, Alonso are on the track. And therefore would have a little bit of traffic to deal with Lando Norris, but it would at least give us something to watch. We are expecting the drivers to pit in and around this time, though. So lap 20 was when I was expecting the first drivers to come in on the medium. And Lando being told on the radio, this pace is strong, and he has indeed turned up the heat as Lando Norris. Max Verstappen has also gone for it, but Norris 4/10 faster than Verstappen. And it feels like now Lando Norris has been told to give it a go. They've held onto those tyres long enough. George Russell pits. George Russell decides to come in for the Mercedes team. Russell early on the pit stops, I think, deciding he'd seen enough of the back of that Ferrari. Let's see where Russell comes out. I'm expecting it to be around Alonso Gasly. No, Gasly and Tsunoda move past, so Russell's going to be a bit further back than I was thinking. And he comes out behind Yuki Tsunoda. Little bit of a gap that he's got there, but he's going to struggle to get past Tsunoda or Gasly as George Russell, because they're within DRS range of one another. Tsunoda's going to have that positioning on him. Gasly's going to have a little bit of a gap, though, to run into before that becomes a problem. Maybe just hoping that Tsunoda and Gasly will move out of the way by pitting in front of him. Lando Norris, though, quickest last lap, 1.5 seconds still the gap. And just closing into the back of Max Verstappen for the first time, really, in this Grand Prix after letting him disappear up into the distance. And Oscar Piastri is now 2.5 seconds off the back of his teammate. Maybe just trying to find it. And Oscar Piastri boxes. Box for Piastri. And he does pull into the pits. No dummy pit stop here from Oscar Piastri. He is in and boxing. So Piastri into the pit stops he comes. Leclerc then disappears away from Piastri up into third place. Antonelli's going to make his way past as well. Hamilton and Hadjar too. Piastri in onto the hard tyres. He is. And let's see where Piastri does come out. Hopefully a little bit of gap for him. I think he's going to come up behind Ollie Behrman. That is Behrman coming past, and Piastri out then just behind Ollie Behrman. And let's see then, what can Piastri do with a touch of free air in front of him. Couple of seconds to run into behind Ollie Behrman. And Carlos Sainz is under investigation, and they've decided that no action needs to be taken on Carlos Sainz when he cut the corner at turn 17, leaving the track and gaining an advantage. I mean, he's still down in 15th place and still 0.8 of a second behind Liam Lawson, so nothing really gained there. Piastri, though, let's keep an eye on Piastri's pace on that fresh set of hard compound tyres. This might be what McLaren are thinking here. They're boxing Piastri, seeing what the pace of Piastri is like, and then they can use that to determine whether or not Norris can get that undercut for the lead. 1.4 seconds the gap to Verstappen at the top end of the grid. Leclerc 6 seconds adrift, and Verstappen is going to pit with Lando Norris just behind. So Verstappen and Norris come in at the same time. So no undercut for Lando Norris in this. Box Verstappen, and Lando Norris has to follow him in. Let's see then. They're both making their stops at the same time. Is Verstappen going to come out in front? Antonelli is going to disappear. Here comes Verstappen, and Verstappen is going to get away just ahead of Lando Norris. Lando Norris on the grass as they come out of the pits. And they were side by side in the pit lane. Lando Norris had to give up the place. Max Verstappen sort of showing Lando Norris the door there. And Verstappen still effectively the leader of this race. 5th place he's come out in. And Lando Norris saying on the radio, he forced me off. Never going to be easy to pass Max Verstappen, is it? Even in the pit lane. Antonelli then leads this race. Hamilton and Hadjar behind him in the podium places. Albon in 4th, but Verstappen, your effective leader of the race still, the first driver to have pitted. And it's not been great for Oscar Piastri, to be honest. Now behind Ollie Behrman in the Haas car. And Verstappen versus Norris. Norris racing with Verstappen. And Verstappen, I don't think does anything too much there. I was hoping that Max Verstappen was going to do it. Let's watch his onboard. Yeah, I don't know if Max really does anything to be honest. He was on his line, didn't like turn in aggressively or anything like that. I think that was just Lando Norris maybe being a little bit just a little bit ambitious with trying to get past Max Verstappen on the exit of the pits. And we'll have a little look. Maybe Lando Norris might even get like an unsafe release there because he was released as Max Verstappen was in the fast lane. And Norris not very happy on the radio still. So the McLaren team are going to start investigating and get on the radio to the stewards. Nico Hülkenberg pits at the back of the pack. Antonelli then leads some Grand Prix laps in Japan. See how long he goes for. Of course, Hamilton we're expecting to go a lot longer because Hamilton starting on the hard compound tyre. Max Verstappen on the radio saying Lando Norris pressed the pit limiter too early. No way that's legal. Interesting. This is going to be the talking point, I think. Norris comes out beside Verstappen. He was a little bit slow from Verstappen in terms of the pit stop, but he did come out ahead of Lando Norris, was in the fast lane, and Lando Norris was then released beside him. Lando could have backed off and slotted in behind him, but decided to go side by side. And I think, I don't think there's anything too much in that, to be honest. Max Verstappen now moves ahead of Alex Albon to put a car between him and Lando Norris. Yeah, exactly. I agree. I think it was Verstappen's line coming out of the pits, to be honest. He was in the fast lane. He was the driver that was ahead coming out of the pits. You're not really supposed to be side by side in the pit lane as it is. It's just the Japanese Grand Prix luckily has a wide enough pit lane to do that. You know, you couldn't do that in Monaco, for instance. Just hit into a wall. And here comes Yuki Tsunoda. So stayed out a little bit longer than the other competitors. He's going to come out in a bit of space, actually, Yuki Tsunoda. It's going to be quite a nice opportunity for Tsunoda to really show what kind of pace he has got inside of that Red Bull. He's going to come out just in front of sort of doing Hülkenberg's Stroll. Ollie Behrman a distance away. Let's see then. It's a bit 50-50 at the moment, isn't it? There's a few drivers that have gone for the pit stop as we expected, sort of between lap 20 and 25. But a few drivers that have left it out. Antonelli, Hadjar, Albon going a bit longer. Alonso too. Gasly, Lawson, Sainz. And George Russell is now right under the rear wing of Fernando Alonso. And Alonso pits in front of him. So that's going to release George Russell back up into 9th place. Norris and Piastri have just dealt with the Alex Albon issue. So our front three are back together again in 4th, 5th and 6th. But it's a fast lap from Max Verstappen. He's 2.5 seconds ahead of Lando Norris in that 4th, 5th battle that is effectively for the lead. Alonso and Gasly come in. Are they still ahead of Yuki Tsunoda? I think so. In fact, has Tsunoda been able to do it? Tsunoda, has been able to get ahead of Gasly there. So Tsunoda moves up a place. And Albon on the radio complaining about the pit stops. Albon knowing now he's starting to lose a little bit of time. Let's see. Albon's last lap at 1:36. Yeah, it's not looking fun for Alex Albon at this point. Albon's going to have to go long and do something a little bit strange with the strategy, it feels like. If he's going to keep that advantage, because he's now behind Bortoletto and Ocon, and he's still ahead of Behrman. But not happy about it. Hadjar decides to come in and pit then. So Max Verstappen back up into the podium places for now. Antonelli and Hamilton still haven't pitted ahead of him. Fast lap for Lando Norris. No further investigation for the Verstappen-Norris incident in the pit lane. So that's going to be how it is. And Isaac Hadjar has come out behind Carlos Sainz. So not too bad at all, because Lawson and Sainz ahead have still got to pit. Just needs to be careful that Hadjar doesn't let Ocon by here. Ocon looking at the rear wing of the RB and feeling a little bit racy, but Hadjar on the fresher tyres should be okay and get away from Esteban Ocon in this. And the undercut hasn't really worked for, well, anyone here, because Hadjar is still comfortably ahead of Albon and Bourbon, who he was battling with. In fact, he's got 2 cars between them. Tsunoda has been able to get in front of Gasly, but Gasly, it felt like, had a real slow stop or a problem of some kind at some point, because Gasly's fallen even behind Jack Doohan. Tsunoda still, though, behind Fernando Alonso. And then Alonso even 6 seconds adrift of Behrman. So Yuki has got a hell of a time on his hands if he's going to score those points that we were kind of hoping he would be able to, as we're halfway through the race. 27 laps on the board once this one is completed. 27 laps technically to go. 53 laps in total here in Suzuka. And again, this race is just, it's threatening to sort of spice up a little bit, but never really full ignition, unlike the grass that we have seen over the course of this weekend. A little bit of a slow Japanese Grand Prix thus far. Antonelli, though, will be happy to be leading. Hamilton just behind. And Antonelli not doing too bad at all, actually. His lap times aren't ridiculously slower than Verstappen and Norris. Sort of 5-6 tenths in it. And Norris still 2.5 seconds adrift. Ooh, race track limits infringement from Kimi Antonelli. That lap time was deleted. That'd be interesting. Wonder if we've got many track limits infringements. Carlos Sainz, that couple of track limits infringements, and Kimi Antonelli. It was Carlos Sainz has gone wide at turn 17 again. Is his second track limits infringement that he's got. What is the strategy for Lawson and Sainz? Just the one stop, I think, basically. I mean, I think most drivers might be on a one stop. I think it's kind of that we predicted a 2-stop like we did in China, but actually these cars are much better on their tyres than Pirelli are maybe expecting, or that they were last year, and everybody's able to do it and just go long. Norris is getting closer and closer to Verstappen. Not meaningfully, though. The kind of advantage that you need to have to make an overtake is sort of 6-7 tenths. And he's not that much quicker per lap. Ooh, as we see Tsunoda go deep into turn 17. It's going to be a track limits infringement as well for Yuki Tsunoda on those hard compound tyres. A little bit of smoke comes off the front right. What type of strategy is Hamilton on? Started on the hard compound tyre at Hamilton, so going super long. He'll be able to go much, much longer than anyone else, really. Starting on the hards, and then he'll be on the racier medium tyre at the end. So could be that Hamilton is playing the long game here. Of course, is losing some time to the rest now. Still, though, where would Hamilton come out if he pitted? Still ahead of Lawson. Like, what would he be? Sort of 6-7 seconds behind Russell at this point if Hamilton pitted. So maybe just hoping that he can make up that time on the soft sort of medium tyre later on in the Grand Prix. It's not the worst strategy that I've seen from Lewis Hamilton. Like, he's at least doing something different. Everyone else has just sort of followed everyone else, like Verstappen, Norris, and Piastri, have all been on basically the exact same strategy as one another, and it's just left them exactly where they were before they pitted, you know? Norris is still 2 seconds behind Verstappen, Piastri another 2 seconds back. Like, there's no real gaining in any way through those pit stops from any of those three, because they all just pitted in a very similar fashion. Piastri pitting a lap earlier, but not substantial enough to get that undercut. And Isaac Hadjar is now right behind the rear wing of Carlos Sainz. Alex Albon has been able to dispatch Esteban Ocon and get away from Ollie Behrman. Ocon and Bortoletto still yet to have pitted in that pack. Lawson and Sainz also sort of out of position, if you will. Which way is Carlos Sainz going to defend? Isaac Hadjar then looking at a move on a Williams car. Let's see if we can get an actual overtake down towards turn one. DRS wide open for the RB. The Williams car trying to defend. Carlos Sainz pulls over to the inside. Hadjar's going to try and get around the outside and does. A lovely little move from Isaac Hadjar and an actual overtake for the first time in a long time that we've seen going for it. I suppose we saw Albon take over Ocon. Max Verstappen now within a second of Lewis Hamilton is going to get the DRS to the Ferrari ahead. Let's see what happened to Carlos Sainz here. It's a replay of him just going a little bit wide at turn 16 and having to cut turn 17. But Isaac Hadjar back up into 9th place and still running best of the rest. His teammate Liam Lawson ahead of him. Won't give him too much trouble. And Lewis Hamilton comes into the pits. Okay, a little bit earlier than I was expecting, but maybe those tyres starting to drift away and Hamilton realising that his pace was not quite in the delta that they needed for the tyre advantage that they will now have. Of course, lighter on fuel as the car goes further into the race and onto some fresh medium tyres. Hamilton's still going to come out, as I say, behind Russell, but it's how far behind Russell is the real question. And Kimi Antonelli is still going on those medium tyres, you know. Hamilton left it an extra 5 or 6 laps because he was on the hards, but Antonelli going very deep on those medium tyres. Maybe they're just waiting for some kind of fire to cause a red flag. And Kimi Antonelli would be leading. That's maybe why Lewis Hamilton pitted. A big lock-up into turn 16. Bit of a flat spot maybe on that front right tyre. Wouldn't have helped out. Just using that advantage. George Russell then is 10 seconds ahead of Hamilton. So 10 seconds the gap that Hamilton has to make up and 23 laps to do it. Let's see what kind of delta he's got. 10 laps younger, medium tyres compared to George Russell's slightly old, hard compound tyres. And finally, Kimi Antonelli comes into the pit lane, which is going to release Max Verstappen back up into his rightful place at the front of the pack. Charles Leclerc and George Russell are going to make their way past, and Antonelli should come out between Russell and Hamilton. And we could see a little Hamilton Antonelli battle at some point. Of course, Antonelli now onto the hard compound tyre though, but it's going to be a fresh set of hards, so that tyre delta to Lewis Hamilton might not be too bad. Hamilton 2.5 seconds adrift of Antonelli, and a little battle possibly brewing for 6th and 7th place. Hadjar has now moved back ahead of Liam Lawson as well, so Hadjar into his rightful place in 8th spot. Liam Lawson yet to have pitted. We're waiting for Lawson, Sainz and Ocon, the 3 drivers that yet to have stopped. which means Behrman is still effectively running in 10th place and the final point scoring position. Yuki Tsunoda still stuck behind Fernando Alonso in the midfield pack. And Alex Albon actually is right under the rear wing of Liam Lawson. And Ocon is being told to let Ollie Behrman past, which does make sense to be fair. Ollie Behrman in the point scoring places. Esteban Ocon's pace not quite as good this weekend as his teammates. And Ocon saying that he'll do it next lap. I'm not sure that's really helping him out in any way. And Alex Albon with the tyre advantage is going to get past Liam Lawson, you would imagine, and does indeed. Alex Albon up into 9th place and back behind Isaac Hadjar in the running order. 3 seconds adrift, though, of the young Frenchman. Esteban Ocon pits, so that releases Ollie Behrman anyway. And Ollie Behrman now behind Carlos Sainz, so just Sainz and Lawson ahead of him, but both of them yet to have pitted. And Gasly being let past Jack Doohan. Gasly grabbing 15th place, but now 5 seconds adrift of Yuki Tsunoda. Was holding Yuki Tsunoda off during this first stint of the race, then dropped backwards during the pit stops and has now only just gotten back past his teammate once again as Pierre Gasly let by. And Gasly thanks his teammate for being very helpful. Lando Norris, though, is closing the gap, 1.5 seconds. Piastri sets the fastest lap of the race as those three come down that pit straight. 1.5 seconds the gap then between Verstappen and Norris. Exactly the same tyres, pitted on the exact same lap. The two drivers at the front of the pack. Piastri then behind. Leclerc in 4th place. Fastest lap then goes to Kimi Antonelli. That's a 131.4. George Russell has gone wide at turn 17. So has to use the runoff area. And Verstappen is controlling things fairly nicely. Lawson and Sainz finally pit, which means everybody is going to have a fresh set of tyres on them. Lawson and Sainz are going to tumble down the order here as well. But they are going to have a tyre delta on everybody else towards the end of the race. Let's see then. Can Norris put Verstappen under pressure in the final 20 laps of this Grand Prix? It's not been the most exciting Japanese Grand Prix that I've ever seen, but you never know. It could be a slow burner. Could be about to heat up just at the end here. Lando Norris, 1.5 seconds from Verstappen, as it kind of has been basically the entire race. We've got Lewis Hamilton, 1.2 seconds behind Kimi Antonelli, but Antonelli going quick. So not necessarily the easy overtake Hamilton would have been hoping for towards the end of this race, starting on the hards and doing the difficult part at the beginning. Hamilton now on the mediums, was hoping to maybe be able to do some overtaking, but not unfortunately. Oh my goodness me, and that is the Haas of Ollie Behrman having a little look at Carlos Sainz possibly. And Behrman almost collides with the rear end of Carlos Sainz. That would have been devastating because Carlos Sainz nowhere near where Behrman is on track, to be honest. Behrman now gets away. So before the pit stops that happened, Carlos Sainz has since pitted and dropped down to 17th. Yeah, I think Herbert, I said at the beginning of the race, I was hoping for no rain so that we could see what kind of pace everybody's got. But this is It's not the most fun. Maybe a little sprinkling of rain wouldn't go amiss at this point in the Grand Prix. Verstappen, Norris, Piastri still our top three then. Leclerc and Russell, fourth and fifth. Oh, Verstappen on the radio. And there you go. Verstappen has been given the go-ahead from GP. You are okay to push from here. So Verstappen is going to be pushing, and we haven't got anything going on at the front anyway. So Lando Norris hopefully is pushing as well, and we're going to see whether or not the McLaren can really live with the pace of the Red Bull. The Red Bull in the hands of Max Verstappen this weekend has been the car to beat. It was all about getting pole position yesterday. Verstappen managed to do it, and that's been where the advantage has lied. And Yuki Tsunoda still down in 12th place. It's been able to get in front of Lawson and Gasly throughout this race as Yuki Tsunoda, but is a second and a half adrift of Fernando Alonso. Alonso on the exact same tyre strategy as Tsunoda. It's not looking amazing. If you're a Yuki Tsunoda fan, if I'm honest, that mistake in qualifying that put him 15th on the grid hasn't been able to do anything since then, to be honest. There's no real race pace. It just feels like there's no opportunity for anybody to get within a window of overtaking. Hamilton on the radio asking, where can he make up some time to Kimi Antonelli? Does he have the possibility of catching up to the back of him? At the moment, it doesn't feel like it. Antonelli escaping away in front of him. Hamilton doesn't look like he's going to catch Antonelli anytime soon, if I'm honest with you. Carlos Sainz sets the fastest lap of the race. Of course, no points for fastest lap anymore. Neither would Carlos Sainz have got a point for that anyway, being outside of the top 10. But nonetheless, Carlos Sainz, a 131.1. Lando Norris is closing in again, but it's not substantial. It's, a couple of tenths of a second. Still not within DRS range. And Lando Norris's tyres are fine, according to him on the radio. Let's see then. Final part of the race. And it feels like the 2-stop that we predicted again is going to be a 1-stop. Just feels like the tyres this year. Don't know whether Pirelli have changed anything dramatic, but, China usually is pretty heavy on the tyres. Same here in Japan. It's usually pretty devastating when it comes to the tyres, but maybe it's the cooler weather, or I don't know. It's just unfortunate unfortunate for the racing here that the tyres have held on perfectly. It doesn't matter if you're on the medium or the hards. They're just there like whenever you need them, and therefore there's no real advantage to being on one or the other. And that just means everybody runs around at pretty similar pace, even if they're on slightly older or slightly fresher tyres. Yuki Tsunoda, still in 12th place. So just discussing that kind of early promise that he had in Q1. Looked really, really solid. It was right behind Max Verstappen. Tiny little mistake in Q2. out you go. That's how competitive it is at the top end of the grid. And then nobody has really been able to do much in this Grand Prix. The top 10, pretty much exactly as it was at the beginning. We've only had Hamilton and Hadjar swap positions. That is the only swap that there has been inside of the top 10 since the start of the race. And Charles Leclerc just being told to take it easy. Down towards turn 1, little bit of engine braking. So is 8 seconds off the top 3 as Charles Leclerc. A nice comfortable gap to Russell behind. Not really anything to worry about for the Monegasque. And even the cars that were on different strategies. You look at Antonelli and Hamilton, they were on very different strategies to the rest, but look at their times in comparison to like George Russell, who's just in front, and basically identical. So there's no real advantage to being on those tyres, even though they are 10, 11 laps younger. And Hamilton's also on the medium tyre. Still hasn't got much of an advantage to really write home about compared to George Russell on much older hard compound tyres ahead. Just the tyres aren't going off, basically. The tyres are perfectly stable, whichever window you're in. Max Verstappen being told might have been a little issue with the adjustment to the front wing during the pit stop. So don't blame Yuki. The Red Bull is not great. Yeah, that is very true. The Red Bull car is also very, very difficult to drive. And to be honest, I'm not blaming Yuki. It was the just saying like that one mistake in qualifying. And I'm just sort of going to show how this season could be like this. Yuki Tsunoda was good. Q1, really quick, showed pace. It was a tiny mistake. Like we're talking, lost the rear end of the car for 0.2 of a second down towards turn 2 in qualifying yesterday, which is why he ended up qualifying where he did Yuki Tsunoda. Kind of lost the rear end, couple attempts, that drops you down to 14th. And then from there, just hasn't been able to do anything. But nobody has been able to do anything in this race. It's just been really tough watching because the tire delta just isn't there. So even if you're in a faster car, even if you've got a better set of tires on you, even if you're racing a completely different car, no one really seems to be able to do anything because there just isn't the advantage there. Having said that, Oscar Piastri is now closing in. Piastri is within DRS range, but Piastri the only driver within DRS range of anybody out there. And this is where it could get interesting. I said in my predictions, I predicted that the two McLarens would be on the same bit of track, and Andrea Stella looking concerned. I would say that face is from Andrea Stella. Norris isn't closing in on Verstappen, and Piastri's thinking to himself, well, let me have a run at it then. Why not? And just allowing Piastri to close into within a second of his teammate. The conditions at the moment. Norris should just give way for Piastri already. I don't think it's going to be quite that. Unless they had some kind of agreement, right? It would be, okay, Lando, we're going to let Oscar have a run at Verstappen. If he doesn't get ahead of Verstappen, then he'll let you have that place back. Like, that would be the only compromise, I imagine, they might be able to get Lando Norris to agree to. But even that, I think, is a bit of a push. I think if Piastri wants to get ahead of Norris here, he's going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. And get his elbows out. Get himself ahead. Down in towards turn 1, maybe, or through the S's. Stroll getting lapped. Yeah, pretty soon. Max Verstappen just coming up towards turn 8, turn 9. I don't know. Stroll's all the way up to sort of turn 10, turn 11. Thank you for subscribing, Supra. Appreciate that. Of course, if you do want to subscribe to the channel, nearly 120,000 subscribers. And for the first time, we're trying out some post-race members chats after the race. So I will be going straight from here to a live chat with the members for sort of, 20 minutes, half an hour after the race. Well, probably this one, 20 minutes, half an hour. There's not too much to talk about here. But after the race, we'll be going live with the members over on there. So become a member, get involved. Then we can have a little chat about that after the Grand Prix. Oscar Piastri on the radio. And Oscar Piastri saying on the radio, if Lando is still saving, can we get a little run at this, to be honest? Because Oscar Piastri thinks that he's got the pace to be able to catch up to Max Verstappen in front. And at the moment, Oscar Piastri saying on the radio, look, guys, what are we doing here? Are we going to call it? Or am I going to get a run at my own teammate? Let's see what we can do. 10 laps left on after this one. Who gets driver of the day? Is it just Max Verstappen for leading the Grand Prix fairly comfortably? And Piastri on the radio is told this is Lando's pace. So Lando is pushing, apparently. And Piastri not happy with the pace of Lando's car at the moment. So let's see what they can do. So GP just letting Max Verstappen know. Max Verstappen being told, keep up this pace, Max. Keep it going. Lando again closing in. Can Piastri get in front of his teammate? Here we go. This is going to be the battle that we're expecting to likely be the championship battle. Norris versus Piastri in the McLarens. Lando ahead in the championship at the moment, although Verstappen will close that gap by 7 points as it stands. In fact, if Piastri can get ahead of Norris, Max Verstappen would go to the top of the Drivers' Championship once again. He's been there before. He most certainly would want to be there again. Piastri closing into the back of Lando. And I think Piastri is going to go for a move at some point soon. 10 laps left to go. If he is going to try and catch Verstappen for the lead, Piastri does need to make that move pretty soon, I would imagine, because it's a 1.5 second gap to Verstappen ahead anyway. That's going to get a little bit bigger, to be honest, because Piastri and Norris are going to cost each other time if they do end up battling. So Lando Norris now stepping on the gas, and Lando Norris actually a little bit quicker over the laps so far, but Piastri still quicker than his teammate. So let's see what's happening here. Leclerc and Russell have kind of settled into 4th and 5th place. Not really anything happening behind. Antonelli, after his very quick sort of first stint, is still going quicker than his teammate, is Antonelli. But whether or not he'll be able to catch up to the back of George Russell, I don't think so. Hamilton, even on the medium tyre, even on a fresh set of mediums, Hamilton just hasn't been able to close the gap to the cars in front. Isaac Hadjar still running best of the rest in 8th place. Then Alex Albon and Ollie Behrman looking like points are guaranteed for this weekend in Japan. 3-point scoring places for Alex Albon in 3 races is a very solid start to the season indeed. Been the most consistent midfield driver so far has Alex Albon. Ollie Behrman's not done too badly at all, though. Back-to-back point scoring finishes in his debut season for Haas. And 1 stop at Suzuka. I know it's mental, isn't it? That is insane. Like I sort of half said it when I was doing the predictions video. I was like, look, we normally expect China's to be 2 stop. That was only 1. But surely it'll be 2 stop in Suzuka. But it just is. I think they've got to go a step softer. So for Bahrain, just go a step softer. So, you know, you've got the C1 to C5 range. Shuffle it along one place to where you expect, you know? Like, okay, we're expecting it to be fairly tough on tires. Fair enough, right? We usually use the C1 to C3. Let's use the C2 to C4. Shuffle it back a step, because this is just like very, very insipid, isn't it? There's not a lot happening at all. Lance Stroll is going to move out of the rate of the race leaders. The front three all making their way past. Piastri has moved outside of DRS range of Norris here as well. Norris, he's actually closing in on Verstappen a touch, but not ridiculously so. 1.1 seconds the gap between Verstappen and Norris. Then Norris and Piastri the same. Charles Leclerc now 10 seconds adrift of the top three. The Ferrari's pace just can't live with the front three in this one. Neither Russell, Antonelli, Hamilton behind. Sort of, as we'd expect the top seven to be, just missing one of the top four cars. Yuki Tsunoda down in 12th place, still behind Fernando Alonso, but just hasn't been able to get within DRS range of Fernando Alonso, to be honest. Just been sitting behind that Aston Martin, hoping that something might happen. And unfortunately, if you're expecting a mistake from Fernando Alonso around Suzuka, I don't think you're going to get very lucky. Fernando Alonso just running around in 11th place very comfortably indeed. 4 seconds, though, off being able to score a point. Lance Stroll, the only driver that's been overtaken and lapped so far in this race. Gabriel Bortoleto, then the next driver along, but Verstappen is not going to be able to catch up to him in the last 8 laps. Lando Norris closes to 1.2 seconds. Piastri within DRS range of his teammate again, but still nothing doing at this moment in time. Yuki shouldn't have left RB. To be fair, he probably would be a little bit closer to where Isaac Hadjar is at this point. And RB, for once, haven't messed the strategy up. They've actually done pretty much the same as everybody else, and Isaac Hadjar is going to come out the best of the rest. I think the RB team should have scored so many more points already this season. Like, the fact that they hadn't was just insane. Norris and Piastri, though, still have that hope. Max Verstappen has had it under control for 47 laps. 7 laps left to go, and Norris and Piastri still trying to close the gap, but it's just staying at 1.2. It's eking up ever closer to that DRS range for Norris, but he's not getting anywhere close to overtaking territory. And Piastri the same, sort of keeps threatening, gets within DRS range of his teammate, but never really gets going. It is all down. 2 seconds covers the top 3, and yet it doesn't feel like there's any real opportunity for any moving and shaking inside of that top 3 positions unless there's a mistake from one of these drivers. Everybody else has just settled in behind, haven't they? Consolidating. Leclerc, Russell, Antonelli, Hamilton, Hadjar, Albon, Behrman, happy with their points that they're taking home and just slotting into being where they are. Hamilton, disappointing, was drifting away from Antonelli at a pretty substantial rate of knots, to be honest. Oh, Kimi Antonelli is on board with him. Gone a little bit deep into the chicane, just a touch. And track limits infringement for Kimi Antonelli there, but nothing too crazy. Is Kimi Antonelli giving everything that he's got. Fastest man at the moment out on track. He is indeed fastest lap for Kimi Antonelli, even with that little cut of the chicane. Oh, and Piastri is within 0.3 of a second of his teammate for the first time, and actually was gaining on Norris pretty substantially there down towards turn 1, but couldn't quite get it done. Is Piastri going to be the light that starts off a little bit of a chain? It wouldn't be. It would just be the one overtake, but it could be the one spark in this Japanese Grand Prix. Yeah, top 10, basically as it was at the beginning. We've had 53 laps of racing to end up with Hamilton overtook Hadjar. That is all. That is all that she wrote so far in this Japanese Grand Prix. Driver of the day? In fact, it's got to be Max, hasn't it? Nobody else has really done anything. Maybe Hadjar. Say Hadjar's done really well to just hold on to 8th place. But I can't see a driver of the day anywhere else, to be honest. Why is Hamilton P7? Because it's pretty much where he started, to be honest. Started P8, got ahead of Hadjar early on, because he is in a much faster car. And then everyone else is everyone's just slotted into everyone. There's been no rain, no fire, nothing. No safety cars, red flags. It's just been 20 cars pretty comfortably. Whatever tyre you're on, the pace has been pretty much the same. Max Verstappen is just a couple of tenths away from Lando Norris once again. Give Piastri a go. They have. There's no papaya rules in play at the moment. They've said on the radio that Piastri is more than happy to go for it. And Piastri was told this is Lando Norris's pace. Have at it. But just hasn't been able to close in enough on Norris. And the times that he's been within DRS range, still hasn't had the chance to really go for that overtaking maneuver. Piastri now outside of DRS range once again, so he's going to have to do a little bit more in this middle sector if he's going to close in and have that DRS advantage down towards turn 1. It has been a slow morning. A slow Japanese Grand Prix, I think it's fair to say. Can Carlos lost so many places. Where is Carlos? 14th. He's actually gained a place. So Carlos up 1 position from where he started the Grand Prix. Started 15th, did Carlos Sainz. But it's just been it's actually Liam Lawson who lost out. Liam Lawson went super long in that first stint. Was hoping, going onto the softs would give him an advantage at the end, but it just hasn't, to be honest. Yeah. So there hasn't really been much movement, has there? Yuki's position, 12th. Just outside of the points. Yuki has been able to get past Lawson at the start, got past Gasly in the pit stops, and then just hasn't really hit anyone else, to be honest. Hasn't actually overtaken a car, sort of, I guess, did overtake car. He overtook Lawson, but it was right at the start of the race when, you do get that kind of shuffling of the order a little bit, especially in the midfield pack. Down towards turn 1, turn 2, as everyone tries to organise themselves without smashing into one another. So I guess that was an on-track overtake from Yuki Tsunoda. But then the other overtake that he's been able to make on Gasly was just through the pit stops. And then that's been it for Yuki Tsunoda. Hasn't been able to get any ridiculous on-track overtakes in any way. And Max Verstappen just a couple of laps away then from another victory in Suzuka. pulling away into Lando Norris's dad in the garage. Here we go. Yeah, it does seem strange that everyone in the top sort of 5 were all on the exact same strategy. But then I guess you could argue that Antonelli and Hamilton tried the other strategy and that didn't get them anywhere either. So nobody has had any kind of real advantage, to be honest, whatever strategy you've tried. Hadjar, Albon and Behrman are where they started as the kind of best of the rest 3 inside of the point scoring places. And we start the final lap of the race. Verstappen, Norris, Piastri are top 3. And Charles Leclerc is still ahead of George Russell. George Russell has been closing in on the back of Charles Leclerc in the recent laps, but again, is not going to be within striking distance on the final lap of the Grand Prix. So hasn't been anything to really discuss thus far. Antonelli within a second of his teammate, as well as done really well to kind of close that gap on George Russell. He's been pushing really, really hard as Kimi Antonelli and putting fast lap after fast lap. But again, just not enough within the time frame of the 53 laps. And here we are then. Verstappen just coming around towards the final sector. Spoon corner as he comes around. And just the 130R and the chicane to deal with before Max Verstappen will jump up in terms of the championship. Gets ever closer to that top spot that he's been so used to over the last few seasons. But it is going to be Max Verstappen then round the final chicane. 3 corners between him and victory. And he's going to take it in Suzuka. Max Verstappen, of course, crowned champion here a couple of seasons ago and takes the victory. Lando Norris behind in second. Oscar Piastri comes home in 3rd place and slots in just behind. Charles Leclerc 4th. George Russell 5th. George Russell and Leclerc just coming around the final bend. Antonelli is going to come home in 6th place. Hamilton a fairly distant 7th compared to the Leclerc, Russell, Antonelli pack ahead. And then Hadjar, Albon and Behrman are going to be our final 3 points scoring drivers. Everybody else, a little battle going on now between Jack Doohan and Nico Hulkenberg down in 15th and 16th. A little bit of a DRS train, I guess, between Doohan and Bortoletto. But it's not going to make much of a difference as Alex Albon and Ollie Behrman have just secured the final points scoring places of the Grand Prix. Alonso, Tsunoda and Gasly come across the line. Tsunoda a 12th place finish. No points on the board for Yuki Tsunoda as he starts his Red Bull campaign. Sainz, Doohan, Hulkenberg, Lawson, Ocon and Bortoletto all coming across the line to finish the race. No DNFs, no safety cars, nothing really. Not a lot to write home about. Just to show you the championship standings as it is. Lando Norris stays at the top. Verstappen stays second, but closes that gap in. Piastri up into 3rd place, displaces George Russell, drops down to 4th. Antonelli stays there. Leclerc also gains a position as Alex Albon is displaced by the Ferrari. Didn't expect to be saying that as we go into the 3rd round of the season, but look, Charles Leclerc moves ahead of Alex Albon. Hamilton still behind Alex Albon, but does at least move up in front of Ocon and Stroll, who are still in the top 10. Hulkenberg, Behrman, Hadjar, Tsunoda actually drops behind his old teammate in the standings. Hadjar moves up ahead of Tsunoda in the rankings. Carlos Sainz down a position as well into 15th. Then Gasly 16th, Alonso 17th, Lawson down in 18th place, doing, and Gabriel Bortoleto sits at the bottom of the championship after having the lowest finish of anybody who has finished a Grand Prix so far. Thank you guys so much for watching. Massively appreciate it. I am going to stop being live here and go live for just members in a moment. So if you want to become a member and join the post-race chat, feel free to do so. We're going to be watching the podium presentation and having a little look at the standings as they were. Thank you for the subscriptions just coming through at the end there. If you could leave a like as you're exiting the building, that would be absolutely wonderful. And I will see you guys that are members in a moment. And everybody else, I will see you in a week's time for the Bahrain Grand Prix. Hopefully, be a little bit more exciting than this Japanese Grand Prix was.